Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold. April 20th, 1999, the Columbine High School massacre in Littleton, Colorado brought a violent end to a time of relative innocence in American society and culture. And it was all down to two troubled teens, Columbine shooters Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold. Eric Harris was born on April 9th, 1981, in Wichita, Kansas, which is where he spent his early childhood. His family then moved to Colorado once he became a teenager. As the son of an Air Force pilot, Harris had moved around fairly often as a boy. While Eric Harris was an unpredictable ball of volatile energy, Dylan Klebold appeared more introverted, vulnerable, and quietly disillusioned. The two teens bonded over their shared dissatisfaction with school but varied significantly in their personality traits and dispositions. For slightly under an hour, the pair killed a dozen of their peers, one teacher, and wounded 20 more people. Mary Bell. Mary Flora Bell was an 11-year-old monster who caused a sensation in 1968 when she killed two small boys in Newcastle upon Tyne. Martin Brown, 4 years old, was found dead in a derelict house, 85 Street, Margaret Road in Scotswood district of Newcastle on Saturday, the 25th of May, 1968. A local nursery school was broken into a couple of days later. Police investigating the incident found 4 notes, one of which referred to the death of Martin Brown. On the 31st of July 1968, Brian Howe, aged 3, was found dead on the waste ground of Scotswood Road. He had been strangled and his body had numerous cuts all over. After spending 8 years in Young Offenders Institutes, Mary Bell was transferred to Moore Court, open prison, from where she escaped with 2 boys back in 1977. They were at large for only 2 days. She was eventually released with a new identity in 1980. Eric Smith. Eric Smith is an American criminal incarcerated for the murder, sexual abuse, and mutilation of 4-year-old Derek Robbie in New York. According to the court documents, Smith, a loner, was often tormented by bullies for his protruding low-set ears, thick glasses, red hair, and freckles. The murder case made national headlines largely due to the young age of the killer, 13 years old, and the victim was only 4 years old. Smith attracted Robbie to a remote location in a park. There, Smith strangled Robbie, dropped a pair of large rocks on the boy's head, undressed his body, and sodomized him with a tree limb. The cause of death was determined to be blunt trauma to the head. Graham Young. Graham Young could have just been a kid who loved science, but his chemistry set would actually prove to be a fatal tool. That's when Graham Young began testing his knowledge of poisons using real people as his subjects. He would serve tea laced with poisonous concoctions to his family and schoolmates. In 1961, his stepmother Molly started developing bad stomach cramps. At age 14, Young became Broadmoor's youngest inmate. By June 1970, his doctors at the hospital deemed him cured. Shockingly, Young had informed a psychiatric nurse upon his release that he was planning on killing 1 person for each year he had been incarcerated. The comment was recorded in his file but didn't affect the decision to let him free. Laurie Tackett. Shanda Renee Scherer, June 6, 1979 to January 11, 1992, was an American girl who was tortured and burnt to death in Madison, Indiana by 4 teenage girls. She was just 12 years old at the time of her death. The incident attracted international attention due to both the brutality of the murder and the young age of the perpetrators, who were aged between 15 and 17 years old, one of which was Mary Lorraine or Laurie Tackett, She was born in Madison, Indiana on October 5th, 1974. Tackett became increasingly rebellious after her 15th birthday and also became fascinated with the occult. She would often attempt to impress her friends by pretending to be possessed by the spirit of Deanna the vampire. Tackett began to engage in self-harm, especially after early 1991 when she began dating another girl who was involved in the practice, Brenda Ann Spencer. This is the killer who started it all, with the first high-profile school shooting more than 3 decades ago. With every school shooting, I feel I'm partially responsible, Brenda Ann Spencer told the parole board back in 2001. What if they got the idea from what I did? Spencer was just 16 years old on January 29, 1979, when she opened fire with a .22 rifle on Grover Cleveland Elementary School across from her home in San Diego, killing the principal and the custodian while wounding 8 youngsters and a police officer. "I don't like Mondays," she famously replied when asked her motive. Spencer has since said she does not remember making the remark that inspired the song by Boomtown Rats, and became a kind of anthem for many of the school shooters who followed. Willie Bosket. How long could you stand the isolation? 1 hour? 2? Or are you ready to escape after a few minutes? Now imagine being in that restricted place for 2 decades. Willie Bosket has lived in the same size enclosure for almost 20 years. As a boy of age 15 in 1978, he murdered several people on New York's subway. Even before the murders, he was a legend with a lengthy criminal record. By Bosket's admission, he had committed more than 2,000 crimes. 200 of those were armed robberies. Bosket pleaded guilty to murdering a transit employee and was sentenced to 5 years in a youth facility, as he was just 15 years old at the time. Today, the law which allows persons as young as 13 to be tried as an adult is called the Willie Bosket Law. Josh Phillips. Joshua Earl Patrick Phillips, born March 17, 1984, is an American murderer from Jacksonville, Florida, who was convicted in July of 1999 for murdering 8-year-old Maddie Clifton in November of 1998, when he was just 14 years old. The search ended a week after the disappearance when Phillips' mother, Melissa, went to clean his room and found that his waterbed seemed to be leaking. Upon further examination, she discovered Maddie's body hidden inside the base of the waterbed. She promptly ran outside her home and went across the street to get the police. Phillips was arrested later that day at his school and was held in maximum security as he made his first court appearance. It was determined that Clifton's cause of death was due to stabbing and clubbing with a baseball bat. He is currently serving a sentence of life in prison. Alyssa Bustamante. Alyssa seemed like a normal teenage girl. Friends said she was always just so sweet and everybody loved her. She was just amazing. But inside her and her internet persona revealed the 15-year-old was a much darker person. It may have come as a surprise to her friends and family, but Alyssa's virtual alter ego would foreshadow what would be her most heinous act, the killing of 9-year-old Elizabeth Alton. The day after Elizabeth's disappearance, the FBI questioned Alyssa and seized her diary. Authorities found a shallow hole behind Alyssa's house that seemed to be in the shape of a grave. The teenager told the FBI she just liked to dig holes. Later in the investigation, authorities found another shallow grave covered with leaves behind the house. Elizabeth's body was inside. Craig Price. Price became notorious in Rhode Island for murders of 4 people before he was 16 years old. Price stabbed 39-year-old Joanne Heaton nearly 60 times in 1989. killing her in her home on Metropolitan Drive in Warwick during the middle of the night. He was just 15 years old at the time. The same night, he also murdered Heaton's daughters, 10-year-old Jennifer and 8-year-old Melissa, stabbing Jennifer 62 times and crushing Melissa's skull. 2 years prior, he also killed another mother of 2, stabbing 27-year-old Rebecca Spencer approximately 60 times in her home in July of 1987. Spencer lived about a few hundred yards from the Heatons' house. Price served his time for the murders as he was convicted when he was a juvenile. His incarceration was extended because of additional crimes committed in prison. John Venables and Robert Thompson. The murder of 2-year-old James Bulger shocked Britain. In 1993, Robert Thompson and John Venables abducted, tortured, and murdered the toddler after leading him away from a shopping centre in Bootle, Merseyside. The child murderers were sent to a Young Offenders Institute where they stayed until their release at age of 18 in 2001. They were both given new identities on the understanding that they had been rehabilitated and did not break the law again. Bulger's parents have said the senseless murders devastated their family and have spoken frankly about how they struggled to keep going after the loss and the huge public interest in their family. Lionel Tate. Lionel Alexander Tate, born January 30, 1987, is the youngest American citizen ever sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. In January 2001, when Tate was just 13 years old, he was convicted of first-degree murder for the 1999 battering death of 6-year-old Tiffany Eunick in Broadwood County, Florida. On July 28, 1999, Tate was left alone with Eunick, who was being babysat by Tate's mother, Kathleen Grosset Tate. While the children were downstairs playing, Tate's mother called to them to be quiet. Tate came up 45 minutes later to say Eunick was not breathing. He said that while they were wrestling, he had her in a headlock and the child's head hit a table. The sentence was controversial because Tate was just 12 years old at the time of the murder, and his victim was 6. He was the youngest person in modern US history to be sentenced to life imprisonment.